Thank you.
Basically, we're going to let Angus just to do the whole talk, and then if he has any specific questions you'd like to know about Catalonia, I'm quite happy to answer it.
I'm not going to answer any questions from Catalonia.
That's good.
Well, thank you all. It was good to hear some Scottish voices there as well. When I came in the door, I'm here and been invited by the social movement. Angus McNeil, I'm the Scottish Nationalist MP for the Outer Hebrides. So it's from one group of islands to another, but I've got to say quite a larger island, a bigger island, and definitely a warmer island, and a less windy island than what I've left behind. And I was in touch, I've keep sheep at home, and one sheep has given us 3 lambs, but the weather is terrible, so she's in a shed at the moment. So I haven't had the heart to tell those folk back home what the weather is like here. It was 19-20 centigrade, I think, when we were driving through earlier on. So, being here, I was then asked to say a few words about Scottish independence and the exciting, hopefully transformative, but certainly historic referendum we're holding in September, on the 18th of September. Given that it's a subject dear to my heart, and the weather's so nice, why not? I think one of the first things we should bear in mind about independence in Scotland, our argument has never been that Scotland couldn't be independent. And these are the words of Alistair Darling, the leader of the No side in Scotland. Another influential commentator on these matters, I would say, would be the man who said it would be wrong to suggest that Scotland could not be another such successful independent country, citing Finland, Switzerland and Norway. As he did so, and that man was a Mr. David Cameron, who resides in number 10 Downing Street. And I think it's worth remembering that Scotland, it would be wrong to suggest that Scotland could be another such successful independent country. I think what he missed out to say was that Finland's GDP was 15% higher than the UK's, Switzerland's GDP was 50% higher than the UK's, and Norway's GDP per capita was 80% higher than the UK's. So he chose 3 very good examples for us, and we are grateful to that and to him for that. And we often quote him as a result because he's supporting our arguments. Of course, his argument is then that would that be best for Scotland, which is a nuanced change to what the argument used to be in the 70s, that we were too small, too poor, and some would say too stupid to be independent. And I think the words in the Financial Times a few weeks ago that said an independent Scotland would expect to start with healthier state finances than the rest of the UK should put anybody who has any doubts to rest that the situation in Scotland is possible for independence, and we have the finances that allows us to go to independence. I think the figures for tax take, Scotland is 8.4% of the UK population and raises 9.9% of the tax. It is true that we have a higher spend of 9.3%, but we are spending, we raise 10,700 tax per head annually, and the UK on average is only £9,000. So taking tax and spend from 2007, 2008 to the present day, spending has been a lower share of Scottish GDP, which many find surprising, but in a way they shouldn't, because unemployment is lower at the moment in Scotland than it is in the rest of the UK. So taking tax and spend together over the past 5 years, public finances in Scotland have been better than the UK as a whole by about £12.6 billion, which again undermines the economic case. And why do I say so much about the economic case? Well, I think for many years people really asked, could Scotland afford it? I think we're quite beyond that now. We're at the stage, do we want to do this? Because we can certainly financially afford to do it, and the choice is then, do we have the belief in ourselves that we are better making decisions for ourselves and running our own country. And that is not a rejection of anybody else's country, or anybody else's government. Every 23rd of April without fail I fly the flag of St George from my office in London. I like England very much. I also found out subsequently that, of course, St George is the patron saint of Catalonia. But it's not the Catalan flag I fly at all, it's the English flag. And I do that from my office in Stornoway too. And I've done that for a number of reasons, but one of the most powerful was an Englishman who said he would vote for me in 2005. When I got elected, a number of well-wishers had stuck up Scottish flags, and he panicked. He thought he had a right-wing maniac elected as an MP. So to show that it was nothing against England at all, I promised him that I would fly the St George's Cross. Unfortunately, that was May 2005, and I had to wait almost a whole calendar year to get back round to the 23rd of April to St George's Day. But as I said, it's not a rejection of anybody else. It's not a rejection of England that we want to be independent. It's not a rejection of Wales. It's not a rejection of any country. It's really a desire, I think, that I'd like to see Scotland in the international community and looking after its own interests in various international forums such as the European Union. Recently, Scottish farmers were given by the European Union an up rating because they have the lowest subsidy levels of all EU farmers. But when the money went to London, the government in London decided to share that money across the UK entirely, meaning Scottish farmers have seen quite a lot less money than they should have. Understandably now, when we talk to Scottish farmers, the majority of the farming community is now a yes, which is quite a surprise from where the farmers probably would have been expected to have been about 20, 30 years ago. And there's been a number of things that have happened to help that along. We've also, over and above our natural wealth, I think we've got a great wealth in people. We have zero student tuition fees, something I think we want to keep in the future. We've more universities in the world in the top 200 per head of population than anybody else. So we're well placed also with knowledge, we're well placed with wealth, and I think we have the possibilities to go forward. I think we have to make sure we're electing governments we want. Since 1959, the Conservative Party has not won an election in Scotland, yet been in power for 31 of those years. 22 of them, I think, is in Labour. The argument I would have is that we should get who we elect. Now, some people would say that would mean we would have Labour forever, but we don't have Labour forever in the Scottish Parliament, because the SNP now have quite a majority. But it would be wrong for us to think we'd have the SNP forever, because we can think back to 1955, when the best performance of any political party in Scotland was by since the Second World War, was by the Conservatives, who were an absolute majority in 1955. So I think we have to go forward in a situation where we go to and argue to the people, and I think the people are well capable of changing their vote, depending on who they want in Parliament, who they want governing them. But the root of it all, I think it has to be the choice of the people. Ultimately, Scotland's a nation in a union. It's not getting its potential developed, I feel fully. I think there's another important aspect. In last April, the bedroom tax came into force. 70,000 houses across Scotland are affected, but this was opposed by 90% of Scotland's MPs. Of all parties, not of all parties, but of Labour, some Liberal and the SNP. So that we are seeing a change in welfare that's sending some more people, in fact, to food banks, and children's charities are saying more children are going to grow up in poverty by 2020 if we carry on the way we are. So something has got to change, something's got to change for the better, and I think we need a government and a country that has the ability to take advantage of the natural successes of the country. Final few points I'd like to mention. The plan is to keep the Queen. The Queen is head of state of 16 other independent countries. We just want to give her a present of a 17th fairly soon. We would stay in NATO. We would stay in the European Union. There has been discussion about the European Union recently by Jose Manuel Barroso, indicating that Scotland might not be in the European Union, or it could be very difficult. Such situation, if it were true, would be massive news in Reykjavik and Oslo, where the European Union is constantly on its knees for them to join. To imagine they wouldn't want Scotland to join, I think is absolutely perplexing, given that if a majority of EU citizens who live in Scotland chose independence, that the EU would not respect that. I think it's a preposterous idea. And also I found out yesterday that the EU is on its knees to San Marino, Andorra and Monaco to come and join the EU, because they're aware of little territories in their area that stand out like a sore thumb, and they like to keep things tidy in Brussels, and they would like to see the whole map, the one colour. They'd love to get Switzerland in, incidentally, as well. But having been to Switzerland, I'm fairly certain that Switzerland wouldn't join the EU. Neither will Norway, and Iceland definitely won't. And the other point, as someone commented, made Scotland out of the EU might give other countries ideas. So for that reason, we would have, I think, a fairly seamless entry there. Of course, you might have heard some chat about the pound in previous weeks from George Osborne, who's actually done us a favour in that after Osborne spoke, more people joined the Yes campaign than anybody else. We actually awarded him Yes Campaigner of the Week that week. The reason George Osborne, I will argue, is bluffing is that if Scotland was out of the pound, the UK balance of payments would be worse and the pound would weaken. And if George Osborne wanted to do that, if he wanted to weaken the pound, that is the UK government's policy. I think not. I think common sense will prevail. In the same scaremongering we had, if we had a referendum that companies wouldn't work or go to Scotland, it was proven wrong. We've seen investment growing. And I have said in the House of Commons recently that the George Osborne on the 19th of September, if there's a yes vote, will have a very different mindset. He will find some humble pie and he will dine very heartily upon it, because George Osborne realises the wit and the sense of keeping Scotland within the sterling zone. Two further points. When Australia became independent, it used the pound for about 8 years. Ireland used it for about 50 years after independence. And I think back in as recent as 1972, 40 countries, independent countries, were using sterling as their currency. Many have changed since then. But we still have a situation where the Channel Islands and Isle of Man are using sterling without much problem at all. And that is what we will do in Scotland. I hope I haven't been rambling on too long. These people start to feel a bit tired. But I'm open any questions on anything that's maybe come to your mind you had before you came, or as a result of listening to me speaking. And I'll let you chair it. That's the best way. Chair it and guide you.
Okay, yeah, good.
Angus, would you, if Scotland succeeds in becoming independent, do you propose a constitution for Scotland? I notice, for instance, that you say that you would still remain in NATO, but a liberal left constitution for Scotland could be a precedent for many of the other proposing independence. It could be a secular Scotland, a non-nuclear Scotland, and if this was encapsulated in a constitution, surely this must be the way to proceed.
Yes, I think you're right. And the idea at the moment is to develop an interim constitution, or as Alexander calls it, a platform constitution. And it would then be for whoever is elected after independence. And we have to remember
that constitution.
If we vote for independence on the 18th of September, we will have elections in May 2016. There will be the elections for the first independent Scottish Parliament. And at that point, I think we need the interim to get us there. But we don't know which party could win, because in any democracy, it's open.
It might be the Conservatives.
It might be the Conservatives. Who knows? My goodness, I could only ask them to make me ambassador in Montevideo to get as far away from them as possible. But I think it's useful to try not to be non-partisan. I know it's very difficult for somebody in party politics to be non-partisan, but we have to leave it open for whoever the people decide to elect to shape Scotland in 2016. Hopefully, I will say it's the SNP. Labour won't say it yet, but if it is independence, they'll say hopefully it's Labour. The Tories won't say it yet, but if it's independence, they'll say hopefully it's the Tories. And if the Liberals are still in existence, they will say hopefully it's the Liberals as well. And I think we'll just continue as a mature democracy then, except we moved all the powers of Scotland that are still at Westminster and reunited them with the rest of the powers that we have at the Scottish Parliament. And I think your point with the Constitution is well made. I do know that Alex Salmond is proposing to have non-nuclear.
Yeah, no, I was thinking that we could create a precedent that would be a liberal left constitution, which may be of some advantage, for instance, to Catalonia and to these other San Marino, Andorra, etc. If we had in place that, but you would think that the SNP, for instance, would be supportive.
Yes, we are. The Constitution. I think the Constitution is a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most crucial parts of the, because it would set the agenda. The pound and everything could be encapsulated into there.
And I think the theory of a constitution is good, because when people like me at the moment are in politics, hopefully we won't see a political class, but we'll see citizens being in politics and we're back to being citizens. And there's going to be a day when I'm back to being a citizen. So I will want protection. And I will want some leverage on my government when I'm back in that situation myself, particularly if who knows who the government could be. So I think it secures the citizen within a country as well, when you've got a constitution. And so that's the plan to happen. Just on an aside with the constitution, Iceland, how you'd call it, crowd wrote a constitution, and it seemed very probable the people within the politicians in the Acte refused to implement it. So which I think was unfortunate when it came forward, particularly after the crash, and writing their own constitution like that it was treated with contempt by the political class at that moment, you know.
Would it be such a bad idea if we didn't get into EU because we had...
Yeah, coming from a fishing community, I understand full well that the EU is a double-edged sword, would be a net contributor to the EU. I think the difficult thing for us, and where we're coming from, is that we only wanted to change one thing. We only wanted to move power from Westminster to Holyrood, keeping everything else central. We want to keep another number of unions after that. The one thing about this is when we do move those powers, we then find ourselves, we have the sovereignty to decide what we want to do afterwards. And if we went into the EU, well, the sky hasn't fallen in for Norway, Switzerland, or even Iceland. Or even Iceland, because Icelandic unemployment, despite the crash, was never higher at its peak than the UK's unemployment, and it's now far lower. So, as I said, I think the GDP of Switzerland was 50% more than the UK, and the GDP of Norway is 80% more than the UK. An important thing about Norway for us too is they've got an oil fund worth, I'm always changing it from pounds to dollars, I can't remember which one's which. I think it's about £500 billion, or around $750 to $800 billion. This is a certain fact. All Norwegians are kroner millionaires now, which is equivalent to about £100,000. The value of that fund each and every Norwegian. The debt of the UK means that we have a 30,000 millstone around our neck, which means the difference between us and the Norwegian is £130,000. It's a huge difference. And the thing is, in Norway, when I meet Norwegian politicians, their argument is about how much to spend, whereas our discourse is usually about how much to cut, where to cut. And they get quite agitated with each other, but we should spend a bit more of that fund. No, we should only spend this. Whereas I like to see their discourse is above zero. Our discourses should be cut at 2%, cut at 4%, or cut at 30%, or cut at somewhere else. It's a huge difference. We've got to remember the Macron paper of the 1970s that was hidden from the Scottish people for 30 years, that said Scotland would have a currency as strong as Switzerland, and we would certainly have an oil fund that was going to be making us in a very comfortable position. And alas, it was hidden, and people were told we couldn't afford it at the time, where successive UK governments knew we could afford it. And I think it was a terrible thing that a government misled its citizens to that degree. It made information about their future top secret for 30 years. It was hidden for 30 years. It was only found after the 30-year rule. And it wasn't found immediately either. It was an SNP researcher who worked for Kenny McCaskill who dug it out. I don't think he believed what he was reading. It took the rest of us a while to believe what we were reading as well. Some of the older members would tell me that they always suspected skullduggery. I've only really encountered the open skullduggery, such as George Osborne. I had no evidence for anything else until that moment. It's quite an eye.
Anna, li puc demanar una cosa?
Sí.
Quines previsions de resultats tenen en cas que no guanyin? Quin és el pla que té el seu partit per treballar davant l'eventualitat d'un resultat negatiu, i després des d'Escòcia com se veu el procés de tot?
And then the third one, how far Scotland is in sea with Catalan.
Okay. Really two parts of that. If we don't win the referendum, then what, I think is the question. Now, I know Alex Salmond never really wants to talk about this. He always says, forgive me if I predicate my remarks on success rather than failure. I would be a bit bolder than Mr. Salmond and say that if we don't win, It's going to be very important immediately to make sure that Scotland is protected, because we do know that the axe is going to try and come at spending. Only today in the Daily Mail, George Osborne's Treasury were saying the recovery is not quite what they expected and austerity will continue to 2020. Now I would argue that austerity is already damaging the economy, because at a period when demand is low, as economists will say, they should be spending money right now and stimulating the economy to come back. And I think economists like Paul Krugman will say that this austerity is delaying the recovery, because when one person's spending is another person's earning. And the biggest spender you can have with the government, if they spend correctly and wisely, you can have a situation where they are actually stimulating the economy again, and then you reel back in times of prosperity when demand is high. But they've got to create demand at the moment. On the same one, okay.
So, bàsicament sobre el tema de si perdran, el que diu l'Àlex Salmon és que no era de parlar d'escenaris on puguin perdre, perquè diu que prefereix estar predicant sobre els èxits que no parlant dels fracassos, no? O sigui que veiem la diferència amb el cas català, que abans que inclús tenim un referèndum, nosaltres ja tenim no sé quants plans, ells ni es plantegen un pla si perdessin. És aquest canvi, aquesta diferència de mentalitat pragmàtica i anglosaxona davant del nostre, no? Que tenim 1000 fulls de ruta. I això no ho he dit ja, això ho dic jo. I després, en el tema de si perden, quin és el que, com continuen treballant, ell diu que bàsicament el que voldria és que si realment perden, que Escòcia estigui protegida, perquè ahir mateix estaven anunciant, Cameron anunciava que fins al 2020 el que esperen és continuar amb els plans d'austeritat econòmica, al qual ell està totalment en contra, perquè si no és amb inversió no es creix la demanda, no hi ha progrés, etc. I per tant, explicar-te que simplificat és això, que li fa por és aquesta austeritat que diuen que tindran fins al 2020 de polítiques econòmiques que no està gens d'acord i que no anirà gens bé per Escòcia.
I think also the SNP in power in the devolved Parliament in Edinburgh have been seen as a good government, and in 2007 we made 94 promises in our election manifesto. We didn't keep all of them. We only fulfilled 86. So we told the people up front we made 94 promises. We did not keep 8 promises, but we kept 86 promises and let our record speak for itself. On the Catalan issue, people in Scotland aren't so aware of what's happening with Catalonia. We're aware of the talk of a referendum, but it doesn't seem to get fixed and settled quickly, and there's always discussions with Madrid, or not discussions with Madrid, whereas our process is pretty straightforward and has been for a while. We have a date and we have a question, and we move on, and we'll watch what Catalonia does, but it doesn't affect day-to-day, and people aren't aware day-to-day personalities and the politics.
Primer ha parlat sobre l'SNP quan parlàvem de què és el que farien si perdessin i tal, ha fet un pas enrere i ha comentat una cosa, que és que el 2007, per exemple, l'Àlex Salmon va fer 94 promeses electorals i fa poc va denunciar que d'aquestes 94, 86 ja les havien complert, el qual és un gran número, no? De 94 promeses, 86 les han complert. Per tant, jo suposo que això us ho estava dient, podem dir que passi el que passi, l'SNP el que vol és continuar treballant perquè està demostrant que és creïble. Amb el tema de Catalunya, el que comenten és que bé, de fet, i això és veritat, però que jo puc comprovar, que la societat escocesa no sap tant ni està tan fixada què és el que passa a Catalunya. Ells treballen en el seu, ells pensen que el seu procés està molt fixat, perquè no és com nosaltres que continuem sempre discutint i estan pendent del que diu Madrid. Ells tenen una data, tenen una pregunta i amb això han anat endavant i tot el més ha anat caient amb naturalitat allí. O sigui que, i de fet és així, Escòcia fa la seva cosa.
Està bé que sigui optimista, el que passa és que les notícies que arriben aquí és que les enquestes no són favorables. Ells...
Sí, potser amb això, potser entenc més jo el que passa aquí amb el tema dels mitjans i la intoxicació que hi ha que ell, però ja li he comentat això, que el que expliquen aquí, és veritat que les enquestes allà les enquestes són sempre les enquestes, però bueno, he's saying that about the prospect and what the polls that here in Catalonia, what we get from Scotland are the polls that are never that good about the prospects of your referendum. But I'm saying to him that we know what the media does, and although polls are always just polls.
I think we're seeing a movement in the polls. I think the polls have possibly been right. We have been behind. There's a movement in the polls, and a movement for yes. There's a huge groundswell of meetings and people discussing independence. Now, I think George Osborne was the big help. He really got everybody talking about it. And I think we'll find that in this referendum, the closer it gets, we expect the pace of change to independence to be a lot more. I think they're using too many scare stories, and people are seeing through scare stories. They have nothing else to do but to get, there's no hope. So there's only bigger scare stories and try to make them better scare stories, but they then look like ridiculous scare stories. One thing I would say that in Quebec, in their referendum in the mid-90s, the polls changed 30% in the last 8 days. So some people are very late in coming to a decision on this. And Alex Salmon, in a speech he made on Tuesday night, talked about the moment when you're in the ballot box with the pen. So he's addressing that. That's the moment. That's the poll that matters. And I can only hope he's right.
No, bàsicament el que està comentant és que les enquestes el que donen a entendre o el que ensenyen és que encara que per enrere estan enrederits, però que el que hi ha és una tendència natural a guanyar punts de distància, i això va augmentant. També diu que és molt important la feina que es fa del dia a dia pel carrer, o sigui, amb el contacte que tenen, amb la campanya que es fan, i és molt important perquè cada vegada que poden explicar els motius de la independència, etc., generalment la conversió és enorme. És només una qüestió de poder explicar a la gent. Són moviments socials diferents, allà és diferent. Llavors s'ha d'arribar a poder explicar a la gent, i quan la gent ho entén realment van cap al sí. Això fa que cada vegada guanyin més velocitat i que cada vegada es veurà aquest augment més evident. També he recordat, i és totalment cert, que quan arriben les hores dels referèndums, en principi sempre hi ha una tendència positiva cap a representació. I el fet del Quebec. El Quebec, de fet, va canviar un 30% en els últims 8 dies. Per tant, hem de... Vull dir, a l'últim moment, com l'Àlex Salmon diu, de fet, l'enquesta serà el dia de les eleccions, quan tinguem la butlleta davant i hagin de posar sí o no, i aquest sí estigui allà, que és el més fàcil, s'ho has de fer, sí. Per tant, amb això són molt positius.
Although it should be pointed out that Quebec did lose right enough despite that 30% change.
Quebec va perdre, no? Però bueno, l'important és el fet aquest de com se giren les coses, que es poden girar les coses.
But opponents used to say that they needed more information. So we've now got the best planned independence process that any country will have seen. And in the last 100 years, 150 countries have become independent in the world. Europe alone has as many independence days as the world used to have 200 years ago. But none of them have gone into the level of planning that we had in thinking. My mother happened to be Irish, and it was high-speed lead and guns. That was the thought that went in there. We were actually using this an argument to make the case to our fellow citizens, because some aren't yet fully understanding why change should happen, and change is often difficult for some people, but they want to engage with change, and they think if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Well, my argument is it's very broke, and we do need to fix it.
Començaré per final que comenta que hi ha gent que és resistent al canvi, que el canvi és una cosa que a vegades fa por, i comenta que aquesta expressió que hi ha de que si no està trencat no ho arreglis, i diu, bueno, però és que la qüestió és que s'ha de veure que el que està és molt trencat, i per això cal canviar, no cal arreglar-ho. Comenta també el fet que les independències no són quelcom excepcional, sinó que en els últims anys ara són 150 estats nous, De fet, el número d'estats que hi ha ara a Europa és el mateix que hi havia en el món sense fa 100 anys. Vull dir que les coses succeeixen, els canvis passen. Sí, bàsicament això és el que
Any further questions? Are we all happy now?
I wanted to know why you picked this spot to have it, because there's not really hardly any Scottish people in this area.
That is a good question, and it's a question above and beyond my pay grade. I don't know. I was at the
Because there's areas further in that say loads of Scottish people.
I think therefore that makes the case.
Just say that.
I think you've got an easy ride.
If you were German, you'd be in the right place.
Okay, so if I was maybe going for the independence of Bavaria.
Yes, this is it.
I think the problem was more with Guido, actually. I know where the Scottish areas are.
Put the Valencia.
You get a flight.
No, upset me away.
But maybe what you should do is ask how many people here will actually be able to vote in September. And if there could be a show of hands, and then perhaps you could ask who are in favour and who are against.
Yeah. Right, so firstly I should ask, who would like to vote? My only question has changed. Who would like to vote?
You want to explain that?
Who would like to vote on Scottish independence?
I could.
Can you explain this?
British independence. Independence by Scotland.
Right. Okay, who can vote?
I could vote.
Okay, and who is voting yes and who is voting no? Yes, 2, 3.
It depends what drink you buy.
3 and yes, who's voting no? 1, 2, 3. So it's an absolute stalemate here. Now, in Quebec, had every ballot box had 2 more for yes, they would have won that referendum, and that's how tight these things can be.
All right.
So I have to make sure these 3 come back to
Yes.
Well, I'm just hoping that you're wrong about that the tide is changing in favour of yourselves, because that's not how I see it.
Okay, go on.
I think that it's only now that we're getting closer that the businesses are now speaking out. And I think, with the exception of British Airways, who made some comment about how they're in favour of this, for whatever reason, I think that generally speaking, businesses are some of them are actually taking action now in the light of the possibility of them happening, because they are going to move out. And I think, and I speak for ourselves, we've got a house in the centre of Edinburgh, we live mainly in Edinburgh, and certainly a lot of people that I speak to are very concerned about businesses moving out, because it would be easy to do so. There will be incentives to relocate down to England, because there are incentives everywhere nowadays for businesses to relocate, and the damage that's going to cause in terms of house prices and everything else.
Okay, I respect the view, but I will obviously try and come back.
And I have to say, I came here with a very open mind, and I've been very impressed with the way you've presented yourself.
Thank you.
Today.
Thanks very much.
But not that much.
We're not
Two more glasses of wine.
I think, yes, absolutely. British Airways and Ryanair were very welcome voices last week who saw an opportunity with Scotland, particularly in air passenger duty, which is a demand management tool for Heathrow, which has prevented, I think, about 1 million more visitors per year, they reckon, according to Young Aviation, coming to Scotland. As for businesses who are going to move out, well, it's the usual suspects at Standard Life.
Standard Life and being with
the usual suspects at Standard Life who threatened that if we voted for devolution in the 90s, they were moving out. There is some similarity. I'm not sure with standard life or like it will, but the reality was, when you look at the words and would examine all possibilities, I think standard life would be staying in Scotland. They've got business in about 12 countries around the world. Credit Suisse, quite happily headquartered in Zurich. It's not the biggest country in the world, but from that they have a great springboard to move forward. I think you're right on incentives, and we certainly will hope to have incentives in Scotland with the lower corporation tax, because we've got to do something about the impressive but too strong city that is London in the British Isles. We need another centre of gravity. So we'll be making sure that we are competing and that this is the biggest scale in Scotland.
How are you going to pay for the free prescriptions, the free universities,
free buses?
I just don't see how it adds up. It can't add up. Well, I think the Scots just now have got it great, absolutely fantastic compared with the rest of the UK.
Well, at the moment we are paying for it, and the SNP government are running a balanced budget. Unlike George Osborne, as I said, we are 8.4% of the population paying 9.9% of tax. We've paid more tax per capita in Scotland than the rest of the UK has for each and every one of the last 32 years, and our GDP per head is somewhere 116 or 118% of the UK's when we include oil. When we don't include oil, I'm not sure why we wouldn't, because Norway includes oil, our GDP is 99 to 100% of the UK's. So we are a wealthy country who can afford these things, and I think we should go on affording these things, because I think it must be so destroying for young people in England, particularly, to leave the university with a bill of £27,000 at the very least before they start. And I think this is why they're going into renting more than buying, which is affecting other areas of house pricing. And I think they're losing opportunities and years in their lives. And you know, some of these young people are going to be, as I'm moving towards it, my children are in their mid-teens coming up now, so soon will be my kids and grandkids. My big worry is that Labour get back into power and give us 9 grand tuition fees, and with my 3 children for 4 years of university, I get a lump of £108,000 bill for their education, while in current years there's no cost at all.
The one thing I would say is if we do become independent, which I think it's highly unlikely, but if we do, then please God, try and sort out these university courses. Because my daughter's just gone through university at St Anne's University. She did a very reasonable course, but I'm sick fed up hearing of all the people that she knows, mainly not Scottish, who are there getting free education and doing courses that are never, ever, ever going to lead them into jobs.
I think the poor students that come up from England, we are charging them 9.
I'm not actually talking about the English students, I'm talking about the Scandinavian students.
They can get in for free, not the Norwegians.
Yeah, no.
Because they're not
I use that loosely.
Yeah, I hear that quite a lot, but you know, I wish when I was at university I had the sense not to study civil engineering, but a course in tourism in Mallorca.
Yeah.
Civil engineer, that job for you. Yes.
Come back here.
Hey, did I hear you saying there that they may consider a lower corporation tax in Scotland to attract business?
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
I think we've got to do that, and the difficulty is that we've got to be aware, whatever it's said in London, we need to be a percentage point or two below it. I think also that there's another allied point in the likes of Standard Life. I've got some of the childcare costs in the UK, and Scottish parents spend something like 27% of household income on childcare, whereas the OECD average is 12% of household income. Now, one of our big plans is to change the childcare system to be similar to Sweden's. And in that case, you get more women particularly into work, people staying in work, and the tax revenue. But we can't do that yet, because if we create an incentive and there's extra money raised in the economy through taxes, that goes to London and we don't get the extra. But the loops are not covered. Why is that important for Standard Life? Well, if you've got a workforce in Standard Life, you find it easier for them to operate and to work in the country. If you have pressure within Standard Life, this is what we want to operate. That itself should be attractive.
Yeah, it should be attractive. It should be attractive. Obviously. And a better childcare setup, so you can keep your employees at work. You don't lose them.
Well, I'm all for putting women back to work. I'm all for that.
I've heard it put many ways.
In the Constitution.
Get all women back to work.
It's obligatory.
I would be tempted in another debate somewhere to put it quite like that. I better not.
Don't get into that.
I just noticed that the last time I was in London, that it's London's like fairground. Everything's really booming in London.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to know the figures there. I noticed, for instance, last week in the papers, it was for £1,100 per head spent in London. A fiver was being spent in Newcastle. You wouldn't like to know the figures.
I've got that figure somewhere. The transport infrastructure spend in London is something. It's £2,600 per head in London. The transport infrastructure spend in the northeast of England is £5 per head.
Yes.
So that was £2,595 difference. The other point you're asking about London, I don't, but I know the tower crane figures. 90% of UK's tower cranes today are illicit, which maybe indicates what's happening.
No, you're only copy.
We're going to be there. You just did what?
That's fine. No,
The friends are leaving from the airport.
No,
It's not that I haven't enjoyed this at all.
Oh, I should say this is available for download. If you've got a Kindle on a Kindle app on your phone, you can download the Kindle app for nothing, and then you can download this for nothing as well. So, or you can have
Get that back in your case.
I'm telling you, that was most of my luggage coming over.
Well, you must have flown Ryanair, did you?
There's something else you can maybe do is show that there are flights from Scotland in the winter.
Yes.
I go Ryanair and BA now because
I know, but they don't fly in the winter from Scotland, which is something you could maybe...
Right.
No flights from Scotland in the winter from December till... Well,
March, middle of March.
This is a scandal,
We've got to fly via Stansted.
Got to fly via London.
London.
So then you're getting double hit on the...
There are three companies, EasyJet, Ryanair and Jet2, fly from Scotland in the summer. And the usual Thompson.
Just be very careful with O'Leary, because probably what he's got in mind is he's going to have some new scheme that if a country that gets independence is going to be hit twice with charges.
Yes, I know.